It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 297. Tonight I'm joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
Hi.
Kodra.
Hello.
Tamriello.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Hi there.
So, gonna start the show off with like a little side thing. So years ago, before the start of this show, I actually was a regular listener of a show called Cat Context, which is a show by three of our friends where they basically just do kind of the same thing that we do on AggroChat, where they talk about whatever topics come into their mind. I was in the Rift Guild with them all when I was listening, and it was through listening to that podcast that I thought, oh, hey, all the random asides that we have on TeamSpeak, which is, where we hang out most of the time, would also make probably an interesting podcast. So Cat Context is absolutely the reason why you have AggroChat, for better or worse. This week, I got a random DM from Lior, and apparently she was listening to another podcast that she used to listen to, and they showed up out of the blue and did a "What have we been doing for the last several years" show. And Lior thought it would be kind of fun to get the band back together and record a show. The problem being, she's allowed all of her infrastructure to expire. She has no place to host it. She has no website for it. So she asked if I wouldn't mind releasing an episode for them. And I did so today, and you should totally listen because Cat Context was one of my favorite podcasts, and I would love to see it come back because it was always charming to listen to, Lior, Arrow, and Ellie talk about random things. And I have always been impressed with how effortless they seem to make keeping a conversation going. And I don't know if there's just a lot of editing that happens or more editing than we do, but they always make it seem like it's real easy to keep things on topic.
I mean, it'd be almost impossible to have less editing than we do. So
It's true. So yeah, you should totally check it out. I threw it up on aggronaut.com, which technically will have syndicated to agrochat.com. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be a return of that podcast, but you at least have one more episode and them talking about what it's like to live in the pandemic and also what happened for the last 3 years.
So it's like that one episode of Justice League Unlimited that was actually just an epilogue to Batman Beyond in disguise.
There you go.
Except with podcasts.
With podcasts. And kids happened and, jobs changed and, all the things that can happen in 3 years.
Yep. Kids do happen.
I do think it would be interesting for us at some point to record where were we when we started this and where are we now? Because I think Tam was the one that mentioned it the other week. That what all has changed in 6 years?
A lot
of things.
A lot has changed. A lot of things have changed. Actually, I think for me, less things have changed because I was further along in my career and such. Anyway, so yeah, you should totally listen. I hear they released a new Hollow Knight randomizer.
I mean, it's been continuously worked on pretty much this whole time. But I just had cause to poke at it earlier this week because someone else started playing Hollow Knight for the first time. So I went back and
Hollow
looked
Knight
at this.
For the first time?
It was Lyle.
Oh, wow. He's in for some stuff.
Yeah, but it turns out there's a lot more you can randomize now.
Oh, dear.
So before, you could basically, at the start, in the beginning, there was Randomizer 2, which let you randomize basically all of the items, the charms.
Charms and abilities.
Charms and abilities, yeah. Which, that's pretty random, but, there's a amount that you can keep in your head there. Then, Randomizer 3 came out, and they added the Junk Pit option, where you could randomize charms, abilities, the money items, so that would be Wanderer's Journals, Hollowness Seals, and Arcane Eggs, and Rancid Eggs.
Also health upgrades and soul upgrades.
Oh, health upgrades and soul upgrades, yes. Great. That was a lot. Apparently there's been an update. Now you can also randomize unlocks for stag stations. You can randomize grubs now. You can randomize enough that it's a lot. It's a lot that you can randomize.
So the things added since we last talked about this are the maps, the stag stations, the grubs, and there are 40-some grubs, so that's not a small thing, and the whispering roots, which are those random trees you hit for essence.
And those are cool because each tree has an item, but you have to actually complete the tree's room, which means you have to get all of the essence that you would normally get from the tree, which is it's a trip trying to do some of those challenges with the items that are available to you. The game is it's very fun to sort of test your knowledge. Like it's especially fun. Ash and I play this where we're sort of just talking and like saying, okay, here's what I've got. The game has a helper log which tells you here are the areas that we think you should be able to get to based on what you have, and sort of looking at those and saying, okay, so how does the game think I can get there? And trying to puzzle that together. I am probably going to spend all day tomorrow, and if you're listening to this as soon as it comes out, probably the day it comes out, doing a pretty long junk pit run, super junk pit, which means all of that's going to be randomized, and I'm going to get hella lost. I'll be on twitch.tv, Kodra22. I'd invite you to come join. I'll be starting at 11 a.m. PST.
Hella lost.
So lost.
This does sound highly amusing.
It's really fun. One of my secret hopes is that there's a supported randomizer for Silksong.
I mean, all the development work in this has gone on in the Hollow Knight Discord, which the developers are actually in, so they're at least aware of it.
But yeah, I don't know if I'll ever get to do it again, but if I do, I'm gonna title this this stream Mantis Dreams, because I'm really just looking for 2 items.
I greatly appreciate how much this team appreciates both speedrunners and the randomizer community. Like, they seem to be very into the fact that this is being done with their game.
I mean, yeah, our last update was, hey, can we add a boss rush? There's a mod for that, but, can we just add it to the game?
Yeah, I know you were linking to me to somebody's Hollow Knight bucket list, and granted, this was like the top Hollow Knight player who's going to try and get a bunch of world records. But I feel like I should add a beating the boss rush to my list of things to try and do before Silksong comes out.
I'm just resolved that I'm probably not going to do that. Like, maybe up through the pantheon of the vessel, is it? Whatever the 4th one is. I'm not doing the 5th one.
You don't want to have to fight Pure Radiance or the actual Hollow Knight?
The 4th one ends with the actual Hollow Knight.
Oh, does it?
Yes. But the gigantic boss rush that is all those put together and harder versions of all of them, no. I'm not doing that one. The game is hard enough.
I mean, there appear to be some players that would disagree.
Sure.
They keep doing crazier things to make it harder.
Sure.
Well, so I feel like there are ways to make the game differently hard. Like, difficulty has a bunch of different spectrums. I think there are a bunch of interesting things in this game that you can make harder, but the boss fights don't really need to be made much harder. I do joke about it, but if something real becomes locked behind Nightmare King Grim, that's probably going to be the end of that run for me.
I did find out that I haven't spoken to the README for this because I got curious. There is a setting for duplicate major items, which causes duplicates of a bunch of things to be placed, not necessarily according to randomizer logic, but so it makes it more likely that you will actually stumble across them.
Oh, that's handy.
Specifically, the Dream Nail, the Dreamers, and Dream Nail, the Dreamers, the Dash, Mantis Claw, the Double Jump, and most of basically the progression items.
Is there an option to turn that off, or is that off by default?
I think it's if you turn on Super Junk Pit, it's on by default.
Okay.
Some of the other settings have it off by default.
Interesting. I guess that's fair. I didn't run. I literally ran out of reachable locations before I got the dash, which let me progress, though, in my first playthrough of Super Junk Pit. Well, I guess I wasn't actually doing Super Junk Pit. I was doing custom, because I turned off rancid eggs. I wonder if turning off rancid eggs will actually makes the game paradoxically harder.
You can turn that setting off independently, so...
Oh, you can? I might do that, because I like being...
so lost.
I'm looking forward to it. That's the point. I've got some time. Come join me. Come chat. Come offer me suggestions of where you think I should go next.
You have spare time and you're willing to squander it.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. My goal is to beat the Hollow Knight, but I have a secret goal of beating Radiance.
I mean, my most recent playthrough stumbled into the item required to do that before I actually got, any of the Dreamers. So, see what happens.
Yeah.
So, how is Lyle enjoying his playthrough so far? Hopefully he's just doing a straight playthrough and not randomizer.
I wouldn't want anyone to try the randomizer until they were already very familiar with the game.
I mean, you say that, but I've never beaten Final Fantasy V without doing 4-Job Fiesta, so...
That's a different thing.
I think that's a totally different...
That's an entirely different thing.
That's one of those, I've played Hollow Knight 5 times, and... it's rote, so let me mix it up. I think that's what the randomizer is more for.
Pretty much.
I mean, running around with nothing but clerics, that's a thing.
I mean, yes, the 4-Job Fiesta can put you in White Mage Hell, but it's better than Thief Hell, so enjoy it while you got it.
Yeah, Thief is pretty bad. So we've had this topic, I think, floating around a week or two. Hey, Tam, I believe this is your topic. Because it says some words in the topic that usually are your topic. like I feel like you're the infinity person of record.
Yeah. So Infinity, the minis game I have played for years and have recently taken like a year or two break from. Like I haven't actually played a game of Infinity in 18 months or so. They are releasing a new rule set, and it's sort of the minis game patch cycle, as it were, where about every 3 to 4 years, it's time for a revision of the core rule set because they just there's like some refinements that you can make. And Infinities they're coming out, and the big thing that they want to do is streamline a lot of the rules and a lot of the functionality, which I think is good because much as I like the game, it is an absolute nightmare of bloat. It has like nested rules on rules on rules. The Infinity Rule Wiki looks like the Magic the Gathering comprehensive rulebook. It's a nightmare. It's got abilities that reference other abilities, which themselves reference other abilities. And so the other piece of that, and the other thing that makes Infinity really hard to play or like hard to get a foothold anywhere is they have what seems like a sensible structure where you get like a purchasing structure where you can get a blister of a mini, or you can get a box that has 4 minis, or you can get a starter box, which usually has like 6. The problem is that there's a lot of Infinity minis, and they're all unique, beautiful sculpts, but actually stocking them in stores is a nightmare because they have like 200 SKUs or something. They have more unique SKUs than Games Workshop.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It's somewhat problematic as far as keeping things in stock.
Yes. I guess they probably don't have more unique SKUs than all of Games Workshop, but like they have more than 40K does, for example. And so their new thing is what they're calling Code Zero, where it is a limited subset of units that are flagged as Code Zero units, and there's a Code Zero rulebook, which is intended to be the here's how to start playing Infinity rulebook. And then coming later are the rest of the units in the game, as well as N4, which is their comprehensive rules for the new edition. But it's gotten me thinking about, I mean, I harp on accessibility in games a lot and how games are mostly terrible at it. And I think that it's possible to draw the conclusion from that I don't like complicated games because complicated games are inherently less accessible, which isn't necessarily true, but figuring out how to make a complicated game accessible is really hard. And I don't know that I can think of good examples of games that do it well.
What's your baseline for complicated game?
I would say anything that takes more than 30 minutes to be able to play and an hour to be good at, as far as understanding the rules.
I mean, I feel like if you're defining complexity by how long it takes for you to like get into it, like that time barrier is inherently going to make games inaccessible.
Yeah.
I was actually going to turn around and say that 40K is fairly accessible because you don't need to know all the rules to start.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that I think is really interesting is that 40K is incredibly easy to learn because like Ash said, you don't need to know all the rules to start. You can get started very, very fast.
Well, and I think there's a big difference between being functional and having finesse, because like I would submit that Carcassonne is fairly accessible because you can get up and running and playing real quick, but there's some nuanced rules in that game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
a lot of it is like, I know that the crowd of people I play games with lean ultra hard into very complicated games, but it's interesting to think about. Like Gloomhaven is a game that I love dearly, but it's an immensely complicated game.
I mean, so where do you place something like a traditional game, like chess?
I think chess is a fairly complicated game.
I feel like chess is also fairly accessible because like in a 5-minute speech, you can teach somebody how to functionally play.
Yeah.
Now, it will take a lifetime for them to understand the nuance of, playing on or off book, but
yeah, and I think that's what's really interesting is like chess is an abiding game that's lasted because it's very, very easy to pick up. And like, yeah, sure, you won't be any good when you start, but you can play. And I feel
like
that's
a whole bunch of games like that. Like Go, for example, is immensely complicated, but like you can learn how to actually functionally play the game in a few minutes.
Yeah. And I think Go is more complicated than chess because there's a bunch of weird edge casey rules that you have to hold in your head and think about.
Well, same's true with Mahjong.
I mean, it's on a different level, I think.
I mean, the complication in Mahjong is entirely in the scoring. Actual play is as simple as it gets.
Right, exactly. But like, well, I don't remember how to score.
But the scoring is...
I mean, the same can be said for all the variants of dominoes.
Yeah. And a lot of it is also, what is the benchmark by which you are being compared to as you learn how to play? Because like, there's a bunch of really, really complicated video games that slowly and deliberately and carefully ramp up the challenge as you play, to the point where by the end of it, you've naturally gained a whole bunch of skill. And so like high levels of complexity aren't unmanageable.
Yeah, this is actually, it's an interesting thing that, so one of my favorite very complicated game designers is Vlaada Chvátil. And one of the things he does in his rule books is recommend that you start with subsets of his rules on your first playthroughs.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if there shouldn't be a better way of providing, okay, here's a subset of the Infinity rules. Or like, let's grade units on like a complexity scale. Like this is a type 1 unit, a type 2 unit, and a type 3 unit. and you can only bring Type 1 units for a Type 1 game, and you can bring Type 1 and Type 2 units for a Type 2 game, and then any unit for like a Type 3 game.
And that's basically what they're doing with Code 1, although it's just 2 tiers.
I mean, that's a pretty reasonable idea. Like,
yeah, it's a really interesting idea, and I think about it a lot for like video games because you've got a computer as the arbiter, can modulate difficulty so that, and like, difficulty settings and dynamic difficulty curves and so on are all super, super useful. And I think about like physical games that have like similar issues. I think about somebody who shows up to Friday Night Magic to try to learn how to play, has an absolutely miserable experience and bounces right off of it.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that doesn't have to be the case. And the same is true of minis games too. Like, there's plenty of people who roll into the wrong crowd to try to learn how to play a minis game and have a miserable experience and check out. And that's likely true of like pretty much any complex game where other players are involved, unless those players are really, really good at easing somebody into a game and like allowing them victories without making it look like allowing them victories to understand what victory looks like in the game without making it feel like they're coddling the other player. Like, that's actually very, very difficult to do, but really important.
Well, and that's always been the lacking component. Like, I mean, I feel like Wizards, for example, is trying really hard with, say, the Commander series of products and like the Challenger deck series of giving somebody something that is functional enough to sit down and play with friends. Maybe needs a little tuning, maybe needs a little optimization, but it works. Same honestly goes for a lot of the Army starter boxes for 40K. But the piece that's missing, as always, is the education. Like, how to get someone realistically taught enough to be able to play. Like, you have product in hand that is functional enough to play, but there's a package of knowledge that is hard to impart.
I mean, Magic solves this, and we can talk about this being a bad idea, but Magic solves this by saying you should probably learn how to play Magic not in a store setting. You should learn by playing Arena or previously Duels of the Planeswalker, where we're going to set up those scenarios for you to learn how things work in a more controlled environment.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that it took Magic, 25 years to get there?
Yeah.
I'm going to give it 20 years. Duels of the Planeswalker came out in like 2012, I think.
It took them finally figuring out how computers work.
Yes.
And having a computer game that wasn't garbage.
Yes.
Yes, that did take a while.
That took a long time.
But it was like 8 years ago.
2010-ish or so is when the first of the good Duels of the Planeswalkers happened, I think.
It took a bit before they were like, hey, if you buy this game, we can give you some Magic cards. I think it was the second one when they started doing that.
I think the first one didn't have any kind of a card acquisition mechanic other than playing through the game. Like, you earned decks by beating NPCs. But I remember it having a decent tutorial mode, like teaching you what the various effect types are and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that the answer is to remove other players from the equation.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It allows you to control the teaching experience more.
Yeah, but it also de-emphasizes competition.
For the teaching purposes, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, but I mean in the sense that you have a bunch of people who are... You basically create another tier where you're jumping from, the equivalent of playing against bots to playing against real people. And I'm thinking about like the League of Legends experience where like maybe you just don't ever make that jump.
I had a lot of fun playing bots. Like the only two times that I really enjoyed myself playing League of Legends were bots or ARAM.
Yeah.
I mean, an ARAM mostly because it forces unoptimized play.
Yeah. So I'm curious, with Code Zero, is there going to be... Is it like there's tier 1 and tier 2, and then like in 4 is the like everything, and tier even like the upper tier of Code Zero doesn't contain everything? Because I feel like
there's Code Zero and there's N4.
Yeah, I feel like that's still a big jump. Like speaking plainly, it feels like there needs to be more gradations of like, here's how we're going to introduce various elements of this game in various ways.
Yeah.
Also, I cannot hear Code Zero without thinking of Mountain Dew Code Red.
Because I'm curious how much it involves. Like, is hacking even in Code Zero?
It is. So the Code Zero rulebook is out, and I've read through it. And it's mostly, I mean, it's as clean as Infinity gets. I still feel like they haven't quite entered the modern era of minis games. But like the playtest rulebook is out, and it's clean and it's reasonably sensible.
Are there link teams?
No.
Okay. See, like when I think of like, let's talk about complicated stuff like hacking, link teams, total reactions. Like, there's the jump. Like, there's a lot of complexity to playing a game of Infinity.
Yeah, there is, and it's hard to figure out. Like, Infinity has the like cliff where if you don't know anything about it and you're trying to learn how to play it, there's just a massive amount of things to learn. Like it's really hard to onboard because the core rule set is so complicated. And that's before you start getting into the like 150 or so different weapons and special rules and so on.
Yep.
And it's like, how do you make a complicated game? Like, how do you make that onboarding make sense? Because, like, you know, I'm absolute ass at making magic decks, but there's nowhere I can go other than like poring over other articles other people have written to get better at it. I can't like learn by doing. And it's probably the most complicated part of the game outside of things like somebody's going to make a deck that makes you play Uno.
I gotta say, like, for Magic, it's one of the cases where I really appreciate the videos that exist as a part to the articles that exist, because the articles are oftentimes written in a language that's inaccessible if you don't know, like, the code of Magic. However, and that's not to say that I don't know a lot of the code of Magic, but there's certain YouTubers that have very accessible, like, deck tech videos where they basically talk about, here's all the reasons why I'm building this deck the way I am. I'm like, this is the reason why I'm going to play this, and this is the reason why I'm going to play this. And, like, if you don't have this, here's a bunch of alternate things that will probably work the same way. But, like, this is the recipe of the deck and why I'm building it and why it works the way that it does. And, like, I think those help a lot. But again, you need to be pretty knee-deep into Magic to even know those exist.
And you also need to want to study rather than play. Like, I don't want to study a game. I want to play a game. And I want to get better at the game by playing it and learning as I play versus, you know, reading a book about it.
I don't believe that you can learn everything by doing. And it might be the case that some games are just like that.
Possibly. I need enough of an on-ramp that I can play. I need enough of an on-ramp that I can learn by playing to fill in the details through study.
And I get what you're saying, though, because, like, for me, so here's another example is raid fights. I can read up on a raid fight and I can watch a video of a raid fight, but I won't actually ever grasp the raid fight until I've actually run through it a couple times.
Yeah, like, I need to see a raid in action before I can sit and read a guide that will make it make sense to me.
Yeah. And that's a different case, but I think, like, in the case of Magic or Infinity or Warhammer 40K or any other game, it's a missing language to read the guide, whereas in a raid fight, you're missing the connective tissue, like how the things fit together in motion.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely know people, I mean, Ash is one of them, who can sit and read about a game and then start playing and be good at it. But, like, I literally cannot do that.
that is a skill I lack as well.
Like I need to see it in action. I need to make decisions. I need to sit there and make decisions with incomplete information before I can understand how all the pieces fit together enough to actually play it. And there's a bunch of games that like aren't. I don't want to say they're not. I don't want to say they're not honest about how complex they are, but they like downplay their own complexity to seem more accessible, and then that just means that you're sucked in and then bad at it. I think League of Legends is one of the worst offenders here, where you can like play against some bots and be like, oh, hey, that's cool. I understand this game. And then you walk into a game with like actual players and it's like, oh, you were done well before you even started clicking.
Aha!
Like StarCraft is the same kind of thing where it's terrible about that, where it's like, wow, you've lost before you even started to play because you were fundamentally not understanding this game.
I was going to say, it's my experience with RTSs.
Yep. RTSs are incredibly bad about it.
Well,
it's the story of Stellaris.
The problem with RTSs, though, is that the way that you play through the campaign is vastly different than the way you need to play another character successfully.
Right.
Which is why I just never played multiplayer in RTSs.
Yeah.
And you end up with and Stellaris is another one that I've been thinking about a lot in the same vein, because for Stellaris, the core gameplay loop is figuring out what happens when you pull levers. Because if you understood all of Stellaris top to bottom, with all of its systems, like that game would be intensely boring. Like every 4X game where it's like, I understand every single system and I understand how they all interact. Yeah, they're totally boring because like you just, this thing this semi-random thing happened. I flipped this switch. I'm not even surprised by semi-random things because I can tell that they're not really that random. It's like, this empire is this combination of things, therefore I know what they're going to do at this stage, which I've gotten to in some previous 4X games.
I mean, it is interesting that they are random because then, like, in theory, like, the optimal play is sort of just to hedge bets in various regards. But, like, I mean, I know there are people who play Stellaris on a completely different level than I play Stellaris. As evidenced by Paradox feeling it was required for them to put a 25x crisis strength option into the game.
Wow.
Why is that there? Who knows?
Because some people wanted it.
Yep.
Like, now every crisis fleet is just like the roving bands are 1.5 million fleet power.
That's nonsense.
Yeah, but like
someone wanted it.
Somebody wanted it. Like, again, you just keep ramping up and up and up and making people play with lower and lower margins of failure.
And maybe the answer is more, you need more granular tiers of play, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Stellaris, you can really fine-tune in what type of difficulty you want in that game.
Yeah.
You can dial that in a bunch of different interesting ways, because maybe you do want to have to deal with a like a 25x strength crisis, but you want everyone else to be pretty weak in the galaxy so you can just sort of run over everyone and then be the defender at the end of the game.
Yeah, you get a lot of like you get a ton of granular control over your difficulty tweaking to get the experience that you like.
Yeah. It was interesting. Going back to Infinity, I think they would be really benefited by having a bunch of scenario play that, like, introduces new mechanics. Like, we're playing this scenario. That means that we're able to bring this interesting unit type.
Yeah. I mean, you basically say, here's your campaign, and your here's the intro campaign, and the intro campaign continually introduces new unit types.
Yeah.
Which is basically how RTS story modes work.
It's true.
You now have a firebat. This is how firebats work.
It would be really interesting to see that concept applied to Mickey's games.
I think it'd be great. It would be. I guess
it's kind of how the the Warcry campaign works.
Yeah, it's kind of
weird as that is.
Yeah, it's kind of how the Warcry campaign works.
Oh. I don't know anything about the Warcry campaign, so I'm curious.
Warcry has these weird faction-specific campaigns, but as you go through them, you get more points that can be used to bring in other units and allied units into your force, rather than the ones you just started out with that are on your card.
Ah.
I do not know how well this works. I do know that you still need another person to play against. I don't know a lot of details about it.
I mean, one of the things I think Warcry does very well and would be curious to see Infinity do is pre-design the maps.
I definitely think it is a possible thing to do, having kind of gone through the design exercise of trying to pre-design the map, and I think that Warcry proves it out as a concept, especially because with something like Infinity, you don't even necessarily need to have
modular terrain.
Well, you don't
probably do need that.
You don't necessarily need modular terrain as much as you need, or what I think you don't need is, I think you don't need to dictate the layout of every piece of terrain. You just need to understand which pieces of terrain are the most relevant and dictate their placement. Put a tower here. And I think that's a thing that a lot of minis games have shied away from, because it constrains what people can use and so on. But I think that's necessary. In the same way that I think about like old first-person shooter levels that people put together back before level design was a refined art. And like, you can play DE Dust, or you could not play Counter-Strike.
Office was fun. DE Dust 2 was fun.
Fair. There were also like 40 other maps, and you did not play any of them.
I played a lot of those maps.
Those maps were bad.
I did not like DE Dust at all. If it's the one I'm thinking of.
I can't call that map to my mind. I just know that Dust is the map that Counter-Strike was played on.
So I played in a competitive clan when I was in middle school. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that on this podcast. I played a lot of Counter-Strike. And yeah, DE Dust was the level that had the sort of middle corridor that everyone sort of would fight over. So because it was the easiest path for the terrorist team to get to the one bombing site that they usually tried to get to. I didn't like that map at all. DE Dust 2 I thought was much better, but my favorite map was the one that was the hostage rescue map in, I think it was Office, and I don't think it was DE Office, but it was just like something CS Office, right? Where you had like this bunker you had to try and get into. I played a lot of that game. It was very fun.
So, just random commentary. So our game was Soldier of Fortune 2, not Counter-Strike, but we played the hell out of it, and we even got into making maps for it. And I was talking to a good friend of mine, and he's the one who actually compiled the maps. I just helped with some of the elements on the maps. But apparently, like, one of our maps actually became something in tournament rotation. Because we were finding, like articles talking about like tournament play referencing one of our maps, and it just cracked me up, like, because it was a thing that like we played for a little bit and then got bored of it and moved on to something else, and I think we uploaded it just as a lark, but apparently it got used. It was called Drum Fergus.
That's funny. I wonder idly while listening to both of you talking about Counter-Strike, how much my aversion to competitive play, sort of full stop, is due to my internet connection growing up.
I can tell you it's probably a lot. I played on a 56K. I played on a 56.6K modem, and I was okay. I usually had like a 0.5 kill death ratio, which means for every 2 times I died, I killed someone. Not great. That inverted when I got a cable modem.
Oh, I only had a satellite internet connection, so I literally could not play anything except EverQuest on the internet.
Yeah. I'm impressed that you could even play EverQuest. But I guess it was slow enough that, yeah.
You'd disconnect a lot.
Yeah.
You'd lag out a lot. But my experience with Counter-Strike was I really wanted to play Counter-Strike because everybody talked about playing Counter-Strike and how great it was, but I couldn't because internet. So I coded bots. Like my intro to both game design and programming was figuring out how to write Counter-Strike bots via elaborate input macros.
That's amazing.
I mean, I was really bored. I wanted to play Counter-Strike. No, the thing that I thought would work, and it does, FYI, no, was I was like, oh, Half-Life has such great AI. What if I could just bring, like, Half-Life's the same game. I could just bring the Half-Life AI into Counter-Strike. No, that doesn't work for a variety of reasons. But it meant that every game I played was against bots.
There were so many games based on the Quake 3 engine, and we abused the fact that like a lot of the same tricks worked in one game on the Quake 3 engine would work in another game on the Quake 3 engine. And like I remember when Call of Duty initially was released, they didn't have a capture the flag mode like at all. And that was the thing that we liked to play the most. So we I say we, it's mostly Vernie, but like he figured out a way to create a deliver the alcohol mode where basically like there was a wine bottle model. So you'd go pick the wine bottle up and then deliver it to like your base. And that was our basic capture the flag mode. And this is actually I'm going to flip the order of topics around because this actually segues into a topic I was wanting to talk about very nicely. So when we talk about some of these games, there is a point in time where games stopped using private servers. And as a result, there is effectively going to be an entire generation of games that you just won't be able to play.
Yeah.
Because servers went offline. And this is a scenario where okay, so, Star Wars Galaxies went offline. People cared enough about it, and also some leaks happened, and now there's private servers. However, there's a lot of games where the populace of players didn't care enough to figure out how to write a server emulator before it went offline. So there's just gonna be this lost generation of titles that are never gonna be playable. And this is super important now that we live in this area where, Good Old Games has done a pretty good job of preserving titles. And the first two Call of Duties, for example, you could absolutely play because private servers existed back then. But I think from the third one on, it was all company hosted servers. So if you get a hankering to play an old Call of Duty game that maybe isn't popular, you just can't. The server's gone.
Careful about that, because while some of those have, yes, it hooked into Xbox Live or whatever, and Xbox Live on the original Xbox is gone, a lot of the actual functionality in those games is peer-to-peer. Almost all of it. Okay. Companies basically stopped running their own servers.
But the login server and all of that still needs to exist.
Sure.
Yep.
It's the same thing that happened when GameSpy servers went offline and killed a ton of games, or the Microsoft what was it called? Games
for Windows Live.
Yep. That killed functionality in games.
But they rewrote that so that they could continue to have online play afterward.
But from a preservationist standpoint, I'm concerned that there's a bunch of games that, nobody's ever going to figure out how to make them work again.
Yeah, every so often I'll, check online and see if, anybody's managed to put together a Marvel Heroes, rogue server and maybe make that live again. But as of yet, no.
Yeah,
maybe never.
I check that regularly as well. I mean, a game that I would love to play apparently is functionally playable. I just don't know if anybody plays it. I really liked Quake Wars, Enemy Territory Quake Wars. Because I was a big fan of the Enemy Territory series, and I thought the Quake Wars version was really good, but it also stopped being a viable thing that people supported really early. However, apparently Splash Damage, before they took down the servers, released the server executables for private servers. So I guess in theory you can technically run them. I just didn't know about that until recently.
I mean, I would like to play Darkspore at some point. Darkspore is dead and it's never coming back.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, you run into the problem that even if somebody does manage to reverse engineer one of these things and get something going, it's technically illegal. And if a company involved still exists, they could shut it all down. Which is part of why I don't think a Marvel Heroes rogue server ever would happen, because, that's ultimately Disney. Apparently there was the old Cartoon Network MMO that I can't remember the name of. Apparently there was a server for that going for quite a while until too many articles were written about it, and somebody at Cartoon Network decided that couldn't be.
There's a lot of labor of love projects trying to reverse engineer things. We all know that Slack basically grew out of the code base of Glitch.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently there's a team trying to reverse engineer and recreate Glitch.
What's Glitch?
Glitch was a weird MMO that never was. It never, I don't think it ever really stood on its own 2 feet. It was a web-based MMO where you milk butterflies and pet flowers, and it was nonsense, but it was delightful nonsense.
It was just weird, peaceful wandering around, and yeah.
And it was the thing that the team that built Slack worked on before Slack. And they ultimately took the chat system they built for Glitch and recycled it into what we have as Slack now.
The only real remnant of that is the Dusty Stick emote, which apparently was an item in Glitch.
But it had housing, it had it was very 2D web-based Animal Crossing, honestly.
Yeah.
But it was beloved by a lot of people. I think if Grace were here, she would chime in as well, because I think she was a Glitch player. But
Fusion Fall is the Cartoon Network game I was thinking of.
It just mostly got me thinking the other day, that there's games right now that will die. We know they're going to die. And once they do, the likelihood of ever being able to play them again is real slim. And it's kind of Hellgate London has lived this half-life of being passed back and forth between a bunch of properties, and someone finally reverse engineered the online play, but it took a really long time before someone was able to do that. And for the most part, it was a single player only game, which is at least good. You could still play it. It was single player. But yeah, that was a game that I loved that didn't last very long. And I'm sure there's lots of games out there that have been similar, that someone really likes them, but they were for whatever reason not market viable, or other weird things happened behind the scenes that ultimately led them to get canceled, City of Heroes. But again, City of Heroes is playable.
Pour one out for WildStar on Grace's behalf.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And to the best of my knowledge, there's not even vaguely close to a WildStar emulator.
Games are too complicated at this point.
Yeah.
And I think about how many games. The other piece of it that I'm thinking about is a lot of those games are products of their time. As in, even if you had an emulated server, you'd have difficulty hitting the critical mass of people necessary to make it functional again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the extra problem with anything that's an MMO.
But I'm not even thinking about just MMOs, because I was thinking back to so if you really like an old Call of Duty, or my favorite co-op my favorite competitive multiplayer video game of all time, you just can't play it anymore. And even if you could, you don't have the people to play Pandora Tomorrow.
Specifically is a victim of the fact that servers don't exist for it that are private.
Oh, I was actually the gaming I was thinking of was Splinter Cell.
Yeah, I know. That's what I assumed you're thinking of, and I don't think servers exist for that.
Yeah, but even if they did, you wouldn't have the people. Or
I
they,
mean,
or even if you you wouldn't have the people, and you wouldn't have the it wouldn't be the same experience.
I mean, you would have to do that scenario with friends. You would have to bring your own audience.
Yeah.
And that was an asymmetrical game, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was fantastic.
It still cracks me up that you can get Splinter Cell goggles in so many games, but we've not seen another Splinter Cell game. You can get Splinter Cell goggles in Animal Crossing.
It's true.
Amazing.
they're very
Wait a minute.
iconic.
Why can you get Splinter Cell goggles in Animal Crossing?
Why not?
You can get
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff in Animal Crossing.
Is it
Yeah.
just that those goggles are not copyrightable?
They're not
Probably.
copyrightable because they were based on a real thing.
Wow, all right. Nice.
That was something that was super common in a lot of the early shooter type games, is they basically put real world weapons in. Well, those are real world weapons. You can't bind them to the franchise. Halo and Gears of War, on the other hand, they have unique weapons.
Yeah, there was an interesting yo-yo effect where it was games had to make up new weapons because they couldn't get the licenses to use real ones because nobody took video games seriously. And then there's a brief window where games tried to use real world things because they finally could. And then they were like, wait a second, it's way more profitable if we can trademark our iconic items.
And merchandising.
Yep. And then we've returned to creating new stuff from whole cloth.
Everybody wants to run around with a Gears of War Lancer, because what's cooler than putting a machine gun and a chainsaw together?
It's like a bayonet, but a chainsaw.
I have...
To be completely fair, that thing is iconic at this point. So congrats to them on designing it.
I will say, I have even in my edgelordiest middle school state, I never understood the chainsaw as a melee weapon thing.
Dude, I love chain swords.
Yeah.
You'll
was
never
gonna say-
take them away from me.
40K has been using chain swords for almost 40 years now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 40K's been using chain swords. The Doom had a chainsaw as a weapon.
Yep.
It's a thing. I've just never understood it.
Man, I gotta say,
Just because a chainsaw is a bad melee weapon doesn't mean people are going to stop.
there was nothing more satisfying than the THQ Space Marine game. The first time I got to use a chain sword just to rip
It was
through
pretty
orcs,
good.
it felt so good, which was sadly eclipsed by the fact that a power sword is infinitely better.
Details.
It's like I don't even know. I think it's because I have a hard time envisioning a chainsword. It does not make any sense to me as a weapon.
Someone has
Because
built one.
Because it doesn't make any sense as a weapon.
No, there are things fundamentally wrong with having a chainsaw that is used as a melee weapon that you swing quickly.
Yeah, no, it would
terrible
not be
idea.
one of those things. It's basically a melee weapon that once it hits something, starts chewing into it. It's like a blunt weapon.
I think part of what makes it cool is the implication that, whoa, the person that is wielding this thing is strong enough and capable enough to actually be able to make this work.
I mean, alternatively, whatever they're fighting is apparently tough enough that just cutting them with a big, sharp blade is insufficient.
That too.
Nids, man. Nids.
Oh, give me a lightsaber any day.
Also an item that doesn't make sense as a weapon, but we overlook all that.
Yeah.
I mean, I see your lightsaber and raise you the monofilament blade.
Monofilament blade at least fundamentally makes a bit of sense.
But once again, you can't trademark a chainsaw. Disney owns lightsabers.
It's true.
You can't trademark the term Space Marine either, but it's not like Games Workshop didn't try.
Adeptus Astartes.
I mean, you can try and trademark a lot of things.
Sure.
See Edge.
Yes, well,
I
a
stumbled
proper
down
thing happened with that trademark.
I stumbled down a path of who is Tim Langdell this week.
Yeah, I apologize for leading you down that path.
So, Mario Maker update. Have we done anything fun with it?
I mean, I am not really a level creator. I don't know how to make a Mario level. I'm gonna try, I think, eventually to actually make like a more traditional Mario style level where you have a couple of different paths, but you're mostly just going left to right. But there's a whole bunch of new stuff in the new Mario Maker, which is all very fun. So, a whole bunch of new power-ups. You've got an SMB2 Mario power-up, which lets you act in Mario 1 tile sets as if you were an SMB2 character. So you, like, ride on all of your enemies and you can pick them up and throw them.
Except for the mechanics aren't exactly like Mario 2. Like, you pick up with a different button.
I mean, you have a bunch more buttons than in Mario 2.
Yeah.
But that was throwing me at first.
Yeah, you pick up by pressing down in the run button. And then you can throw. I played a level that was basically a whole bunch of bonsai bills being shot at you and you having to use them as platforms, which was really fun. Like, how can you, like, quickly moving through this level using bonsai bills as, like, rapidly moving platforms was pretty cool. They added the frog suit for Mario 3, which... Nice. Yeah, now swimming levels can actually be fun. They also added a new trick where if you are holding an item, you can actually build up speed running, and if you are running as Frog Mario, you can run on top of water. There's a bunch of very impressive looking things people have done with that. They added the P balloon to Super Mario World,
but they gave it different controls.
Yeah.
Which is probably for the best, quite frankly.
I haven't played with the P-Balloon yet.
The P-Balloon is, like, I'd have been okay if they never added that to Mario World style. Because it was only in levels that were awful in the original game.
Yup. That thing sucked. I hated it. Especially the level in Mario World that was chaining P-Balloons.
Yeah, that one's awful.
That one's
a special
awful.
world level. The P-Balloon in Mario Maker, however... Well, 1, doesn't run out after a certain amount of time, and 2, lets you basically jet in a direction, rather than just be subject to the whims of all the fireballs and Chuck's throwing baseballs at you that are in Mario World. It is a better addition in Mario Maker than it is in the original game.
I still don't know that it's something I'm going to play with a lot, but sure. I haven't gotten a chance to play with the... Acorn, the raccoon suit from New Super Mario Brothers, but that looks pretty cool.
I mean, Acorn is just a better version of the Tanuki suit, not Tanuki, the raccoon tail, yeah.
Yeah. It lets you sort of glide through the level and then also get a second boost, so you can sort of celeste your way through things.
Yeah, they introduced that one in the Wii U New Super Mario Brothers, I think.
And, yeah, I do not know.
I like the idea that people can release full levels now, just as an easier way to chain together levels. So
for full worlds?
Yeah, like if a creator has a vision, I imagine there's going to be some Kaizo Hell entire Mario World levels now that people used to have to do with ROM hacks.
I think most of those assume you have unlimited lives, so they aren't going to put them in the world system.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the world system will actually encourage some of those creators to make, like, shorter, less punishing levels. Like, you don't want to put a level into a world that is going to take 30 lives to clear.
I'm real disappointed that basically everyone can only advertise one world.
Yeah.
That seems like wasted opportunity.
And it's always your world.
Right.
But I personally, the thing I was hoping for from the worlds was secret exit, but that was not to be. Yeah, I'm excited for it. I've played through some less punishing worlds, some very popular less punishing worlds. It's cool. Like, you're able to see a person's bunch of ideas together. It doesn't feel like they're necessarily cohesive yet. And so I'm looking forward to somebody coming up with the ability to put together a cohesive world.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting to see. Like, I think that's the thing that's the sort of the reason that I've never gotten into Mario Maker, is because I haven't really seen that much that wasn't like a hell level or like a cute gimmick.
I'd like to see somebody like actually apply Mario level logic to where you start with a new world, and each world in sequence basically teaches you concepts that are going to be used throughout the entire world.
So let's just back up a sec. The most popular levels in like the easy category tend to be gimmick levels, and the most popular levels in like super expert are the impossible levels. But there are like 2 levels of reasonable Mario levels in between those.
I play mostly in the expert category. Normal levels are mostly pretty normal. Expert levels are starting to get to the less difficult, super hard levels.
I mean, ultimately what I'm saying is I'd like to see somebody apply learning logic to Mario Worlds to where, okay, well, now I'm in a desert-themed one, and everything's going to be desert-themed, but we're going to teach you a bunch of mechanics as we go through these levels so that it gets, more difficult as you get to the deep end right before you get to the boss battle.
Yeah, and it might be that, like, the kind of thing that I come to Mario for isn't really well realized in Mario Maker.
Like, what are you coming to Mario for?
I really enjoy the, like, interesting thematic progression through levels and worlds. Like, I don't really play Mario games for a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but also there's an artistry to Mario levels that makes them memorable and interesting experiences that, at least in the, like, I mean, I've only played like 15, 20 hours of Mario Maker, but at least in the time I messed around with Mario Maker, like, I haven't really seen that same kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that, like, the fact that you only ever could do standalone levels prevented you from having that sense of progression.
Well, and I think right now we're seeing a lot of worlds that exist that are mostly just a remix of individual levels that people have created. So, like, I don't know if there's been enough time for somebody to really work through a thematic progression world.
Yeah, I'll be even a little bit more than that. It's not remixes. They're just like, oh, I uploaded all of these levels. Well, now I'll upload I'll take all of these levels and slot them into a world I can create, and it'll be my world. But people aren't really, people haven't built whole games yet. There are actually some people who had built a series of levels designed to be played in sequence. And I have not found their worlds yet. I'm looking forward to trying those out. But a lot of those they're more mechanically teaching you things. There's a lot of puzzle levels that are like that.
Yeah.
A lot of puzzle creators who are like, well, let's teach you how to, like, basically take you through a series of one-screen puzzles.
And one of the things that I haven't seen very much of is levels intentionally presenting you with aesthetics or like vistas using Mario assets.
Oh, there's
like
a lot of
Mario
themed
World
levels.
I feel like actual Mario games aren't very good at that either. The 2D ones, anyway.
I don't know. There's a bunch of like, not every level, but there are a bunch of levels that I can think of where there's like a moment where you move to a new area and it's like, oh, that looks amazing. Or like, this is a really cool transition that we just did. Or like, it's not a great example, but what is it, Sugar Dome Mario World level that's got and there's another version of it in the Bowser area that's like a cave with the big yellow thing going up and down.
Oh, one of the Vanilla Dome levels.
Yeah. And like, that's just a thing that I can remember because it's just visually striking. And I don't know, maybe that falls into the category of gimmick level because it lacks the, like, overall context of the rest of the game. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can think of the exact 2 levels you're thinking of.
But it's like you can call those to mind immediately as, like, visually striking, just experientially striking.
I'm curious.
Right, it's a distinctive set piece, but the fact that all creators have the same toolkit means you're going to see any given set piece repeatedly in Mario Maker. whereas they only had to make 80 some levels for World, or not even 80.
Yeah.
So it became a 2-off. I don't know. I feel like the novelty of something like that is just not going to be there in Mario Maker.
Yeah.
Unless you're playing like literally right now, because there's a bunch of brand new stuff and creators are discovering it as well. So they have to use it in novel ways.
Yeah. My experience with Mario Maker has generally been I play it for like an hour or two, and then I go and pick up like Super Mario World or like Mario Odyssey or a different like mainline Mario game.
Have you played Mario Maker 2 single player?
I haven't. I played the original and kind of checked out.
They did a lot more with it in the sequel.
You mean the story mode?
Yeah.
So maybe this is me. I find those levels to be a little bit lacking connective tissue as well.
That's fair. And they also start out really easy.
They do start out very easy. That's not that bad. Like, I don't mind starting off easy, but they don't let you... One of the things I struggle with that is they don't let you get in and out of the next level very quickly. Like, you have to do a bunch of moving around and talking to people to go get the next job, which opens up the next level.
The thing I still desperately want is Zelda Maker.
I am pretty sure that I don't want to play that game.
So A, they gave it to you. It's in Link's Awakening. You can build your own dungeons. And
Yeah,
B, what Ash
those
said.
are like I don't know, like that's lacking. I want to be able to build an entire Zelda world.
I don't know that that's something people will be able to do well.
It's a lot of commitment too to like build an entire overworld.
Like, that's the thing, is people can build a Mario level in 4 hours, 5 hours. And that's still like for a pretty chunky Mario level. But like Zelda Maker, whoa, that would take a while. I'm pretty sure there are like mod tools that you can make Zelda ROM hacks.
Yeah, I've seen them, and I've played around with them a little bit, but like the only thing that I don't like about those is you're still constrained by like the overworld map or making changes to a specific page of the overworld map. It's not the sort of thing where you can just like blow it away and build it from scratch.
I mean, can't you edit the whole darn thing?
You could, but God, that would be tedious.
So would blowing it away and starting from scratch.
I mean, like, I used to do it back in the Wolfenstein days, where I would just fill the entire map with empty space and then start from scratch, because I had a Wolfenstein editor.
Yeah, you're describing a tool that people do use, and those people are extremely dedicated, and I don't think you can make a commercially viable Zelda Maker.
There is a PC-based Zelda Maker. It doesn't work terribly well, but I have seen it, and maybe at some point with additional iterations, it will get better.
There's also a PC-based Mega Man Maker, and I know people were playing it for a while, but that game also seems like one that just really, really doesn't... Like, the levels, each individual level by itself is not what makes those games interesting.
The problem that I find is, like, with ROM hacks and things like that, is the level of detail that I would have to get into is... I am quickly getting into the territory where I might as well just make an indie game.
I mean, Mario has lunar magic, but for everything else, yeah, kinda.
What was that game that was like Grawl, I want to say? Like, it was a knockoff Zelda game that you could like make your own levels in.
Oh, I don't know.
That's not ringing any bells. When I think knockoff Zelda game, mostly I think of 3D Dot Game Heroes. Or Cloud, whatever it is.
Dark Cloud?
No.
Dark Cloud
is not a knockoff Zelda game.
Grawl Online. Graal.
That name makes me sound like it. Like, makes it sound like it's like an old roguelike.
Sure.
The website is definitely a turn off.
Oh, what the hell is this?
Listen, I was like, I remember this existing. What Bella's telling me about.
I just don't.
I no longer want any part of this.
Oh.
Yeah, me either.
I think my initial statement was correct.
Yikes.
Okay.
Yikes.
I hate to end on this note, but we've gone over. So, any final thoughts?
Don't play Grawl online.
Apparently.
Play Hollow Knight instead.
Play Hollow Knight.
Play anything other than that.
Hope to see you guys in chat tomorrow sometime.
Yep. Tune in to Kodra's stream tomorrow. Also, listen to Cat Context, and we will see you next week.
Play something fun.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.